Tom Masiero, Great American Mining.
And the levels look great, fine, good enough. We'll go with that. All right. Thank you for joining us here today. And fourth quarter talk, kind of what we're talking about today. And I thought, what a great opportunity to bring in the man, the myth, the flaring legend, emissions management legend, the guy who's converting emissions management flaring problems into Bitcoin out in the Bakken and other places. Tom Masiero, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me on again.
Let's get an update on your mining Bitcoin, but I did want to talk about blockchain and Bitcoin as well, just to, more or less kind of just a crib notes as people prepare for their, fourth quarter, because as well as I do, those two words, Bitcoin and blockchain, are going to be mentioned a lot more in meetings over the next 5 years. But talk to me about an update on what you got going on in Shale Play USA with mining Bitcoin.
Sure. Right now, I think what you're seeing, for the most part with producers is they're still kind of there's whatever term you want to use, they're still hunkering down, but there's a lot of planning going into 2021. And right now, it seems like the hot word, we were talking about it earlier, is the term ESG. And apparently that's, a term that environmental, social, corporate governance is something that we're going to hear a lot about moving into 2021. And I think we'll have kind of a different meaning to different particular producers. And so we've had a lot of conversations with folks who are trying to understand what their their responsibility socially, environmentally is in terms of dealing with flaring. And we're one of a number of use cases that can help them in regards to this. And I think this ESG, trend is going to help solidify, in terms of helping the industry deal with flaring.
So treat me like you're selling to me now. I'm going to give you an opportunity to, put on your sales hat and treat me like I'm an operator, because I just talked to a producer yesterday, and I'm not going to mention their name, but they're changing their ESG report from 45 pages to 98 pages. And that's how serious this ESG stuff is right now. And how is that going to help me ESG wise?
Well, I mean, the writing's on the wall, Jason. There is a movement, and it's very real. You've talked about it for as long as I've listened to your podcast. The Greta Thunberg stuff. That narrative is not going away. When you've got states like Texas and the Permian starting to take flaring seriously, that the writing is on the wall. So what we do is provide kind of, I would say, a two-pronged approach, right? We can provide a hands-off approach where we'll come in, you'll sell us gas. If you've got a gas that's unable to be collected through the pipelines and you're just flaring it because you can't do anything with it, we'll come in and consume it on site. We'll pay you at a discounted rate, and we'll consume that gas for you. And then this helps your overall ESG requirements. Secondly, we can also partner with upstream producers to become kind of a value add as well as like a partner. And what I mean by that is we share in the producer would share in the upside on the Bitcoin. And so we're actively in talks with a couple producers right now who I think, because of COVID, because of the downturn in the oil and gas market, have been forced to think more creatively about what they're doing with their molecules and how to best get the most value out of them. And so that's the other angle that we work with folks.
Hey, what's a Bitcoin? Just, the very, very basic broad brush version of what a Bitcoin is.
Sure. Yeah. Like we've talked about it in the past, Bitcoin is a form of digital currency, and it's no different than you and I exchanging cash hand to hand, right? There's nobody in the middle. When I hand you that dollar, and once it's in your hand, it's yours. And in Bitcoin, that actually exists digitally. That's what these miners are doing. These miners are basically paid digital bodyguards or digital bank vaults that help make sure the network itself, which is over $250 billion of value at this point, that's what all of these little machines are doing when they're operating. And they consume a lot of power. And the most effective way to do this is to find cheap power at scale. And that's kind of how a number of us folks have entered into this space, because we see this opportunity to use, the waste gas that's available and actually scratch an itch on the oil and gas side as far as like this flaring issue, and at the same time provide us a opportunity to do this profitably and to have a real business around mining Bitcoin and providing security for the network. So that's how I would describe that.
Tom Masiero, Great American Mining. He's converting flaring into Bitcoin for producers and midstream companies out there. I know you're out in the Bakken. Permian, you were looking at getting into. Did you ever get down there?
Yeah, we're currently right now developing a solution that will work in the Permian. Very, very different use case down there because of the heat. These machines that we use to mine Bitcoin, A, require a lot of air movement, and B, require a lot of ability to dissipate heat. And so in the Bakken, especially when I was up there visiting about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I saw you, we had a couple 95 plus days. And you can probably count on one hand how many of those days you guys have during the summer. That is about the extent of our air-cooled units can do, which has external fans and that can kind of suck air through and get it out of the container. In Texas, there's just too much heat down there. So we're developing a liquid immersion-based system that can actually work down there. And so we're hoping to have that live by the end of the year.
I just saw a video on YouTube where the California wildfires have caused an increase in different kind of fuels, where an onion producer had to keep drying his onions, and so he had to use some natural gas. He had to bring in some natural gas heater pumps, that type of thing, in order to dry his onions. It's just different how people are having to transition their energy flows and energy thinking. Just overall energy thinking, I guess, is a way to state that, I guess. What are you hearing from producers? Is it a cost issue? Are they being receptive to it? Talk to me a little bit about, some of the successes and then some of the hurdles you guys are trying to get over from that meeting standpoint. You know what I mean?
Yeah, hurdles wise, I think the big thing in the Bakken is the actual rights to the gas. I think there's some complexities with some of the midstream ownership on the acreage dedication that it kind of puts producers in a tough place. If there's not capacity in a pipeline, then they have to flare, and they're kind of at the mercy of the pipeline, because they would love to do something with that gas that they have. So that's one component that I think is more specific to the Bakken. The other component is them being interested in Bitcoin itself. Them trying to understand a little bit more about it, because I think there's some powerful, I don't even want to call it like illustrations, or the narrative around Bitcoin being kind of like a currency of energy is it's kind of sticky. They like talking about it and they want to know more about it. So we've had a number of not just follow-up calls, but we've actually started a webinar that we provide specifically for oil and gas folks who want to understand more about Bitcoin, and specifically Bitcoin and how it can work in their particular industry. And so we've had 4 of those right now, one a week every Thursday at noon, and we've had close to 100 attendees over those 4 weeks.
Make sure you send us the information. We'll certainly kick it out to our network and promote it. And if you want to put the webinars on our network afterwards, we'll certainly accommodate that too. That's good information. Like I say, especially as people are going into fourth quarter, they're getting hit with ESG, they're getting hit with COVID, they're getting hit with Bitcoin and blockchain and all kinds of different things. where are we at with the blockchain market right now? And by market, I mean, I do see a day where most of the transactions are going to be done through a blockchain method, whether it be forced through the cloud or whether it be some sort of international regulation that will be ushered in to bypass certain currency what do you want to call it?
Requirements.
Yeah, you know what I
any
mean.
type of regulations. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's going to expedite all that and bypass a lot of the mumbo jumbo. And there's people out there laughing, going, "He doesn't know what he's talking about." And the other half is going, "Oh, he knows exactly what he's talking about." So, talk to me a little bit about blockchain, where we're at with that advent of integrating that technology into the day-to-day life of industry.
Yeah, for sure. I think the big trend that really is, and I'm glad you followed up with me this week because there's some actual news on this front. There's a publicly traded company called MicroStrategy that recently announced, and they had over $500 or $600 million in their treasury, kind of outstanding cash that they had, and they saw the Fed's kind of doubling down on just money printer go burr, and they said, "Wow, you know what? This $500 million that we have, that our stockholders, have given us to do stuff with, the longer we keep it in the bank, the worse it is for us, right? There's like a haircut that goes on every month because of inflation, and now, the ability for that cash not to be worth as much." So they literally, these guys were not Bitcoiners before this company, MicroStrategy. They went on a hunt to figure out the best way to, put that cash in a safe instrument. And so for the first time ever, a publicly traded company invested over $400 million in Bitcoin, and they're holding that as a reserve currency for their stock right now. And so that's kind of, I would say, spurred a lot of conversation around where I believe the real innovation around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency really is it's around the money. And that's what's compelling about, I think, what we're doing on the energy side, because what these miners are doing is validating the effectiveness of the protection of this store of value that this publicly traded company has, essentially made a $400 million bet to secure this Bitcoin because they believe it's going to be a better investment for their cash long term and short term. So I would say the money aspect, especially what's going on with the Fed and kind of everything financially right now, it's becoming kind of like a digital store of value, kind of like gold, but it's much easier to buy and to hold and to have it as your own.
Can I ask you a dumb question that I don't think I would know how to answer if I was asked? And I don't know if you know either, to be honest.
Well, I'll let you know if I don't.
So I'm trying to, put my average eyeballs on, my average head, and they're so bombarded with things, and, it's just hard to keep up with day to day. And I joke because I forgot there was a Keystone pipeline, a Keystone XL pipeline, and I forgot there was two separate pipelines and they go different directions, PayPal, Venmo, people know we're going to a cashless society. Starbucks doesn't even take change anymore. So, or in some places they don't, at least. So the digital currency is coming, but I think a lot of people are thinking PayPal and Venmo and that sort of thing. And then they hear Bitcoin. Is it the same? Is there a difference? How would you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. The two main differences, and they're probably words that you'll kind of hear as buzzwords around blockchain and cryptocurrency, is one, Bitcoin is distributed. So, and then secondly, it's permissionless versus PayPal, Venmo, etc. There's still a bank that's essentially the middleman in that scenario. So if I go to send you money via Venmo, Jason, in theory, the person who controls whether that money, someone's taking account in their own ledger, whether it's a public ledger or a private ledger. In this case with Venmo has their own ledger that they're saying, okay, this money got transferred over to here. It's in his account. In that, Venmo can go in and take that money out if they want to. And so in anything else that we're seeing right now, it's no different than a bank doing that. And I think that's what makes what Bitcoin does very special, because Bitcoin is permissionless. So that means I don't need the bank's permission or anyone else's permission to send you that money. I don't need to have, quote unquote, a Venmo account in order to do that. All I need to do to be able to do that is have my own Bitcoin wallet address, and I can conduct a transaction with you. And so instead of the bank's servers or Venmo servers validating if that happened or not, Bitcoin miners are the ones who are essentially providing that network. And what's great about that is that it is distributed. So it's people all over the world, everyday Joes, having these machines that can partake in this. And what that does is it ends up empowering a kind of censorship resistant form of payment. And I think right now in the US, it's not probably as, I wouldn't say it's like a really incredible use case, but I do think in a scenario where, and I think oil and gas folks kind of can see this. You've talked about how banks have started putting pressure or have had activists put pressure on them not to loan money to oil and gas companies, right? There's kind of an attack vector there. Whereas with Bitcoin, that doesn't exist. You can't put pressure on me not to do this transaction with you directly if I'm a Bitcoin miner. And so that's that's the difference between the two of them.
And that's one of the reasons why you think oil and gas companies may gravitate towards Bitcoin over, say, like a more controlled digital currency like a PayPal or Venmo or whatever offshoots are going to come from that. It's the bank derivative versus the free market derivative.
Agreed. That's a great way to put it. One is truly a free market. Like it's as free market as you can get, and that's why there are a number of other energy sources that Bitcoin miners use. The oil and gas market is kind of the new hot trendy one, but it's still very, very early on. We've got very large scale miners who use hydropower, wind. Some use solar, but not really. A lot of hydro, some geothermal in Iceland. So it's kind of this global energy race to find who can have the cheapest, most scalable, reliable power source. And ultimately, for an oil and gas producer, when the light bulb goes off, when you got oil and gas producers who are starting to do this at scale, and they are essentially minting their own Bitcoin, and then they're able to transact with that Bitcoin, and it will have value directly. That's one of the things I think things will get really interesting, because they won't need any outside, I would say, like permission or the deals can be done very, very quickly. If they want to send Bitcoin to another oil and gas company, or if they want to do purchasing of other assets, they'll have their own currency, essentially their energy currency, to purchase those things. And it will become an accepted and widely used way of doing it. I'll tell you one thing. The first time I sent a large amount of Bitcoin, in terms of like dollar value wise, I was very scared because it's not the most user intuitive thing. It's not as clean as like a PayPal or a Venmo. There are some, you have to kind of essentially educate yourself a little bit before you do it. But that it is a magical feeling when you see a large sum of money magically show up in your wallet address within a couple minutes, and without not having to do any type of crazy wire transfer, or I had to put in requests to take all this money out, and I had to wait for the bank to tell my credit card, okay, this transaction's approved. It really feels like magic. So I think that same phenomenon will take place with oil and gas companies when they start transacting in this way too, because it makes life faster and easier.
Well, that's the one thing where I think the blockchain is going to make Well, it's going to change everything just because of the instant payments and just the accountability factor that.
Transparency is key for that stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is good. It's good for all industries.
Well, it is. And keep in mind the difference between blockchain and Bitcoin, those are two different things. Bitcoin is a currency, whereas blockchain is more of a contract, I guess.
So blockchain technology is what Bitcoin is built on top of. It's basically just an open ledger. When I say a ledger, just think of a spreadsheet. And instead of that spreadsheet being private or a database that no one else can see, blockchain is an open database that everyone can see. Not everyone can, they can't change it, but that's the idea behind it. So blockchain is more of the kind of the guts of how Bitcoin works. And Bitcoin is money built on top of blockchain.
I've always looked at blockchain like, here's the example, Uber Eats. Okay, so you essentially, all this stuff is being done in the cloud. You've ordered food in the cloud, you're paying for it in the cloud, and this and that. But in reality, there's a guy that's making the food physically, there's a guy that's picking it up physically, and then there's somebody who's physically paying for it. But all this stuff is being done through the cloud, and nobody is actually, and now with the door delivery, nobody actually sees each other. They just drop the stuff off and this and that. But it's all trackable by apps and by, different mechanisms. And once each person fulfills their part of the contract, they get paid. Because the restaurant gets paid and then the driver gets paid. And it's so different. You know what I mean? How
it's very transactional.
It's very transactional, very transparent, and very instant. There's none of this 30 days, 90 days, this type of thing where people are waiting for receivables. And that's going to change everything.
I agreed. Those are some of the conversations we've had with producers, not just producers, by the way. Mineral rights holders as well are extremely interested in this as well, because in some gas contracts, they have the ability to take their gas in hand. So they can say, you know what, I don't actually want to, take my percentage of the royalty of what we're, contributing our gas to this oil producer. I just want to take it into my own custody. And so you've got, and primarily it's because they're the ones who are always calling these producers, trying to get their money out of them a lot of times. And it can be 6-8 months, late. It doesn't matter. They're the last ones getting paid, where, as you correctly kind of, you put yourself into the future on this, is that now you can have a system where there can be streamlined payouts that happen daily, and that you can see directly. Okay, 10% went to the royalty rights owner, 2% went to the reservation, or all of these things in those payouts, and there's complete transparency in the entire process, which I think is a very good use case, specifically for, trying to legitimize the energy industry to be able to fight back against these narratives that are out there.
All right, fourth quarter talk. You got your, couple minutes. Keep it brief. People are busy. You give them your pitch, man. People are meeting for fourth quarter talk. Tell them why you should be out there mining Bitcoin at their well site.
Well, yeah, we talked about it before, Jason. The big push for ESG compliance and what that's going to look like, and we know for a fact that a lot of the larger producers are going to be looking very deeply at this technology and to solve this problem with flaring. And you're going to want to get ahead of it. And we would love to talk more about it. You can reach us at www.gam.ai, and you'll see a sign-up form, and you can get enrolled in one of our weekly webinars to learn more about it.